In this video, I'm talking about 5 lessons that I learned after I read Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. Let's go! Oh wow, the sun. Oh wow, hello. Hello guys, thanks for joining me and welcome to another book review. The book I'm reviewing today is Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. And this book was actually Financial Times and McKinsey Business Book of the Year of 2018. The full name is Bad Blood: Secrets and Lies in a Silicon Valley Startup. And it basically tells the story of Elizabeth Holmes, who was kind of a superstar of the Silicon Valley biotech several years ago or so, with her startup called Theranos. Kind of sounds like Thanos, I just realized. So Theranos was a company that was manufacturing hardware for blood tests, as well as software for these blood test devices. So what it was trying to do is it was trying to disrupt and reinvent the way we test, the way we have blood tests done. So the idea was that you would have a teeny weeny device, and you can have a blood test.
Patients would prick their fingers, storing blood in a small cartridge. Pushing this cartridge into a machine would run the tests. The Theranos machines envisioned would perform tests on the spot and beam information via the internet to a lab where personnel would interpret the results and send a report back.
Long story short, it really didn't work out at all. It was a massive fraudulent scheme. There were so many lies involved in the way Elizabeth Holmes and the management of the startup was selling it to investors.
Elizabeth Holmes, once Silicon Valley's fastest rising star, is now under the harsh glare of a very different kind of spotlight.
Ms. Holmes, please raise your right hand.
She's finally forced to answer to the Securities and Exchange Commission as she's investigated for an alleged elaborate, years-long fraud.
I kind of drew 5 lessons from the book. And I'm about to share them with you. So lesson number 1 is fake it till you make it doesn't really work. I'm a big fan of fake it till you make it. I like to take projects up that I don't really have the kind of either cognitive capacity or enough education to carry out. And then I like to figure things out along the way. I think for me, I'm much of an overthinker. So if I start thinking about stuff, this would take too much time and nothing would get done. So now I'm kind of saying yes to things and then figuring out how to do it in the process. But I think one big difference between me and Elizabeth Holmes and me and Theranos is that obviously they're a medical startup company and health of people is at stake, and their lies were so kind of blatant and it was so obvious that they wouldn't be able to deliver what they promise, that in their case, it's immoral, and in my case, it's perfectly fine to fake it till you make it to an extent. The lesson for me is that you have to be transparent about fake it till you make it tactic, and you have to be transparent with yourself, judging whether you can do something or not, whether you can deliver or not. Because I think lying once about something then can really cause a kind of a snowball effect of more and more lies, and then it's just everything is out of control, and you feel like you can't get out of it, and you're stuck in this loop of lies that is probably not going to get you to the position where you want to be. In Theranos' case, they claimed that their device could run hundreds of different blood tests on one blood sample. They also claimed that the device that is very small could actually produce the results of like a kind of fully equipped blood testing lab, and all of those weren't really true. So given that we see where the company is now, which is nowhere pretty much, bottom line is be very careful with fake it till make it tactic. It's fine to use it, I use it, but in some cases it is just not cool, like in this one. So lesson number 2 is the one that is really interesting for me, and it's around this concept of a young startup founder and how attractive that is. So Elizabeth Holmes, I think she graduated either from Harvard or Stanford, or something like that, and she went straight on to starting her own company, and then it picked up a lot of speed and a lot of investment in the beginning. And I feel that partially all the media attention and all the venture capital money played kind of a bad joke on Elizabeth Holmes, who is actually quite a talented business operator. So I think the fact that, you know, she, after some first kind of results and after she got some public attention and some attention in medical space and kind of the biomed space and the Silicon Valley, I think she got hooked on the attention of, look, this is a new kind of Steve Jobs, this is a new Bill Gates, and it was kind of all amplified by the fact that she was a female. There aren't that many female CEOs, so she kind of got propelled to this pedestal of fame in Silicon Valley, and she got completely high on this type of supply of media attention, of admiration, and she's this type of personality. So for me, I'm pretty much the same type of personality, to be honest with you. So I think it's very important to, as I said, to not give into this glorification. We really over-glorify youth and early achievements to the extent that it's so difficult then to admit that maybe some of those achievements aren't deserved, or maybe you exaggerated them. So I think maybe we can, as a society, we can try to reframe the way we see early success to make it a bit more sustainable, to create a slightly different framework. Lesson number 3 from the book is that science got completely ignored by investors, by retailers, and eventually by the consumers, by the users of the technology. So there were so many red flags throughout the book, and I'm just going to give a few examples. So first, the company suggested that they were collecting one blood sample, and then they were taking this sample and running dozens or hundreds of different tests on the same sample. But then the procedure of blood testing is that you have to inject a certain type of chemical into your blood sample in order to draw some conclusions of how healthy the blood is in this particular component. And the argument that on the same sample you can do a few tests was scientifically kind of ridiculous. But because the company was such a success and because it had such big marketing and reputation hype, investors didn't pay attention to that. Another element was the fact that the injectors themselves were made to be very, very small. Elizabeth Holmes was a big fan of Steve Jobs and the design aspect of her devices, so she made them look pretty and very small. And it was obvious to a lot of the professionals that in such a small device you cannot possibly conduct the tests of such sophistication. But again, in this case, science was pretty much ignored and thrown out of the window. So that's kind of the third lesson for me, is that you have to be careful about the scientific basis of what you're using or what you're producing or what you're told about, because, you know, sometimes the hype and the money and the community kind of really ignores the scientific base. So my fourth takeaway from the book is that the harsh Steve Jobs-esque leadership style inevitably leads to difficulties, and this kind of concept unfolded throughout the book in a few different ways. One of them was that basically Elizabeth and some of her business partners were portrayed as kind of being super rude to their employees, not ever being empathetic, being very secretive, being very restrictive about what employees can and cannot do. And there was this culture that was pretty toxic, even though, you know, arguably toxic cultures are more common when a company is run by males, not females. But in this case, Elizabeth Holmes, her leadership style, even though I guess it was working to some extent, I think we're probably at a point when we need to depart from this idea that a CEO has to be ruthless and has to not give a shit about their employees and so on and so forth. I think there's probably a case to be made for a warmer leadership style. And also this kind of ruthlessness backfired later in the book when the reporter who wrote this, John Carreyrou, when he started approaching ex-employees of Theranos, some of them were more willing to blow the whistle and to talk about the negative aspects of the company, precisely because of the way that they were treated by Elizabeth and by the management. So if you treat your employees badly, it doesn't just create bad culture, it also can backfire at some point in the future. So we were talking about how science was ignored by investors and consumers, and to me this fifth takeaway is really connected to that, which is there is so much silly money in the system when it comes to technology startups. You know, this was a biomedical startup of blood testing, so it's a potentially a very, very profitable industry, and so many investors jumped on this opportunity and poured ridiculous amounts of money. Like, I think one of the first rounds, it was something like $800 million raised from different VC firms, from angels, as in angel investors, not those guys. And to me, this is like a perfect example of venture capital firms and angel investors really looking for one big hit and throwing money at companies that aren't tested, that have flaws in their business model, that have flaws in the product or the service that they do. And this kind of idea of, wow, this company can potentially be worth billions and billions. So the fact that this company can be worth so much is blinding the sight of so many professional investors that are that are supposed to excel at this type of stuff. All right, so this marks the end of the video. Thank you very much for watching. I'm feeling really calm today. Like, have you noticed my calm demeanor today? You know, I'm like hyped up, but like not too much. You know what I mean? I'm pretty grounded. I feel pretty grounded. If you're interested in stories of personal fiascos, as well as kind of interested in learning what not to do in business, or just want to read a thriller, really, that is based on real events, that is basically a documentation of what happened, definitely pick up the book. Also for the film lovers, the film Bad Blood is coming out with Jennifer Lawrence in the role of Elizabeth Holmes, and I think it's in a year or something like that. I haven't even seen the trailer yet, but maybe you can read a book before you watch the film. So definitely highly recommended. Make sure to test your blood often, and like, I don't know, like go eat an apple or something. Like, you need that iron. Thank you very much. Bye!